Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, Derek, and you know what time of month it is? It is time for the most recent MAME update. That is because MAME 286 is released, and honestly, in the last year or so, I would say this is one of the biggest MAME releases that has come across everyone's eyes. It's one of those things, MAME is always updating, always bringing us new stuff, but this one is absolutely feature-loaded with a lot of new games and a lot of new improvement to games that never really ran all that well in the first place. Because MAME emulation is so incredible, you know we're going to be doing a MAME monthly news roundup. And if you need a MAME guide or MAME tutorial, check the playlist on my channel because I will help you get everything set up. And before we get too far involved, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But you're going to see a ton of Model 2 improvements on the Sega side of things when it comes to MAME 286 because Sega Model 2 is one of the best boards of all time. It has some of Sega's best games, and now a lot more of them are going to be promoted to working with better graphics, or in the instance of Last Bronx, which you just saw, graphics that actually made sense. Because last time we talked about some of these games, they definitely had a lot of weird graphical corruption, and in Last Bronx, all of the characters' polygons basically just didn't appear. So now basically almost every single Model 2 game is going to be working very close to what the standalone Model 2 emulator actually does. And that is absolutely massive because, again, Sega never re-releases these games. Maybe every once in a while you might see one in a Yakuza entry in the arcades. But I will say that emulation is the #1 way you want to play Sega Model 2 games, because even I have more than a few in my closet, and I will say they're absolutely a chore to set up, and sometimes it takes longer to wire up some of the racing games than it does to actually play them. So for me personally, I usually gravitate towards emulation for Model 2 as well. Now, to get a little bit technical on this, there is a very big reason why we're seeing better Model 2 emulation is actually going to carry over into improvements in other games that MAME can run, even if they're not on the notes this month, it seems. Because I've done a lot of testing, as has the Cool Pup, the moderator of my Discord, and other members, to find out exactly where the improvements are. That is because the Sega Model 2 board uses an actual Analog Devices Shark digital signal processor on some of the games, and that is something that has been incorporated but not quite perfected in other emulation on MAME. So moving over to the Konami Hornet right here, this is Thrill Drive, and interestingly enough, there's two different versions of this game released, one on the NWKTR arcade board from Konami, and one on the Hornet board also from Konami. Now, the Hornet board is going to use basically the same chip, that Shark chip, as Sega Model 2 does, so anything that's utilizing that, you should see improvements across the board in MAME, at least in the testing that I have done, as well as members of my Discord. It's one of those things, not everything is guaranteed, but people that had issues running the Hornet version of this game at full speed are now getting 100% of the frame rate, and they're not using absolutely nuclear-powered gaming rigs here either. Now, you can't use a potato to get this level of performance, but you can probably use maybe two potatoes duct taped together to kind of get a 100% frame rate on some of these Konami Hornet games. And again, that's really the interesting thing when it comes to MAME emulation. Improvements to one board, improvements to one game can carry over into other games. And even though I've talked about Thrill Drive more than once on the channel, I will say it again. If you've never played this game before, you're absolutely missing out on one of the best arcade racing games ever made that basically nobody knows even exists. So trust me, definitely check out Thrill Drive in MAME 286. Now, actually talking about this Shark chip, I don't have an open shot of a Model 2. Still haven't shot that, so it's not in my content library, but this is a Konami Hornet right here, and there are other Hornet improvements in the actual update notes for MAME 286 that we'll go over. But it is very complicated hardware, and that's exactly what MAME is emulating, and that is how impressive MAME emulation truly is. Because none of this hardware is simple in any way, shape, or form. You have a PowerPC processor on there, and you'll see that chip with the little circle on top. We'll go into that in just a moment, but that is the Shark chip that we're talking about on Model 2 as well as Hornet. And it's one of those things, digital signal processors were used all the time in this era of arcades, along with these 3D effects chips, at least on the Konami Hornet side of things. But this is the chip that you're going to see emulation improvements for in MAME 286, and that's definitely going to be bringing a lot more to the table, and it's going to allow a lot more games to run a lot better than they ever did before. Because you'll see here the Sega Model 2B CRX hardware uses that Shark chip, and that's why you're getting stuff like Last Bronx now being playable. It's also our first soundtrack sample, so listen, and I'll be right back with more.
Round one, fight!
More 少し遊んであげてもいいわ。
I mean, it sounds really good to me, but you leave me a comment down below and you tell me what you think. Now, keeping on that kind of shark digital signal processor thread here, we're taking a look at Terror Burst, another game that the moderator of my Discord, the Cool Pup, captured for me. This is half him capturing some of the updates and half me doing some as well. And this is a game, just like Thrill Drive, if you've never played it before or never heard of it before, I can't recommend enough that you do check it out. Now this again is going to be running a lot better for a lot more people. Now if I emulate this maybe a year or so ago, I could get near to full speed on an i9-12900K, overclocked to 5.4 GHz on a water cooler. But now you're going to be able to get that same 100% speed on something that wouldn't be considered 3 years ago, basically one of the best processors you could put into an editing rig, because honestly, this computer is primarily what I use for work, whether it's YouTube or otherwise, and of course I just happen to be able to game on it because it is a very high spec for rendering in Resolve. And that is another big improvement in MAME 286 this month. You always want to have games running, but then you can go in and actually improve them in emulation to reduce the overhead on the specs you want. So all of the Sega Model 2 improvements this month and we've seen in the past are going to be useful for other games as well, because it's not like every single arcade board out there uses 100% completely different hardware. Sure, something like the Model 2 is using an Intel CPU, where the Hornet is using PowerPC, a completely different architecture, but when you have shared chips like that Analog Devices Shark chip, you are going to see better performance all across the board, and that definitely is something that should be celebrated, because these games are absolutely incredible. And even if I do have a Terror Burst PCB in my arcade storage closet, I actually don't have the IR sensors to be able to aim on screen, because it's not technically a light gun game, and the fact that it's using a raster sensor is actually IR, kind of like a Wiimote, and I still need to acquire those. Now moving back over to Model 2, Virtual Striker is also going to be promoted to working, and I will go over the promoted to working list after the next soundtrack sample. And it's one of those things, just be aware, even though we're getting improvements, not everything is going to be perfect. In a moment, I'm going to give you a soundtrack sample, and you're going to hear one sound effect get stuck. It's not going to hurt your ears, it's not clipping, you'll just hear a sound effect repeating over and over again. So even though Model 2 emulation has gone from basically nothing to almost working for every single game perfectly in MAME, you do still need to be aware it is still in development, so you might have some issues here and there. So here comes the soundtrack sample. It'll be obvious when that sound effect gets stuck, and I'll be right back with more MAME.
Corner kick. Free kick.
So Model 2 might be improved, but it isn't perfect. Now moving back over to Hornet, you're going to see that there's some improvements here on the actual implementation of Gradius 4. And even though the game came out on PlayStation 2, I absolutely love the arcade original, and it's one of those things, the graphics in Stage 3 have been fixed up, and some of the freezing issues that people were encountering have been repaired as well. And it's one of those things, not many people are aware, but the Konami Hornet isn't just one arcade board, it's technically two, just kind of like we see on the Sega Model 2, where there are different steps to basically give you different revisions of the hardware. Now something like Gradius 4 here is going to work on the first revision Hornet, which uses 3DFX chips. And there's a second revision of the Hornet, which is going to move over to 3DFX Voodoo 2 chips. So you have the original Voodoo chipset in an SLI configuration on one board, and then you have Voodoo 2 in SLI on a second board. So it's one of those things. It can be very difficult to get everything running correctly, because it really isn't like you're dealing with emulation on a set spec. It can move around just like we see in Model 2. And that is why some of the Model 2 games have been working for months now, and other games like Last Bronx have been putting up some issues. It's just because the spec actually changes. Arcade boards are not like home consoles where you see a PlayStation 1 is always a PlayStation 1. They can have different chips on them depending on what year they were made, even if they are called Model 2 or Hornet. And stuff like NBA Play-by-Play here, going to see a lot of improvements in MAME 286 as well, and definitely check it out. It might not be NBA Jam levels of good, but it is very close, and it's always fun to have another sports game in MAME. But let's go from 3D to the realm of 2D, because you're going to see here Turtles in Time, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles beat 'em up, is going to have some sprite fixes in the surfing area as well. So It's one of those things you might not notice, but sometimes things were completely missing in MAME, and it is just one of the factors of actually running emulation and writing emulators. There can be really small items that aren't working correctly or aren't working at all, and in regular gameplay most people might not actually notice it, but the goal of MAME and all the developers is to make sure you have one-to-one accurate emulation to preserve these games for all time, so you will see some improvements in Turtles in Time as well. And even though a lot of people, myself included, consider the Super Nintendo version better than the actual arcade release, this is definitely still an amazing game, and you have 4-player support here, which is a huge deal compared to something like the Super Nintendo version, so you're going to get improved graphics on something like Turtles in Time, and that definitely makes a huge difference. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me, Turtles in Time, the arcade original, or the Super Nintendo version. I would be very curious. And it is fun. You know I love myself some 3D MAME, and we're going to be getting right back into it because there are more improvements. It's also going to be our next soundtrack sample because Midnight Run on the Konami ZR107 board has been fixed up as well. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds and I'll be right back with more.
Ready, rookie?
If you've never played Midnight Run before, I'm not saying it's a hidden gem, it's totally a decent game, but it is one that is now going to be working much better in MAME. But honestly, the real takeaway this month is the Sega Model 2 improvement, and I will leave a link in the description below to the text file that explains every single thing that changes in MAME this month. Because the reality is, if I did an actual segment on every single addition, bug fix, or otherwise, this would probably be like a 12-hour long video. You know, I go for the highlights here and the stuff I know people are interested in. So Sega Model 2 is going to be much improved, and you're going to be getting a lot of titles promoted to working that really weren't working in MAME before this update. And honestly, now that we have that shark chip improved, getting stuff like better performance on the Konami Hornet for stuff like Thrill Drive is just 10 out of 10, one of my favorite things, because I am always telling people you have to play Thrill Drive. I have the original Thrill Drive 2 and 3 in my collection, and I'm still trying to find Thrill Drive 4 Crazy Streets, because it basically went onto arcade floors as a test unit and never saw wide distribution, so right now it is a quote-unquote lost game, even though I have the I/O and security board in the closet waiting for a hard drive one day so I can put them together and make it playable for everyone. But go grab MAME 286 if you need a MAME tutorial or MAME guide. I have them on the channel, but trust me, there is a metric crap ton of fun for the month of February, and I can't wait to see what next month brings. But short of that, we're done. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.